Hey guys, Dan here with Battlefield Curator, and we are on top of Lookout Mountain near Chattanooga, Tennessee. What we're going to talk about today are the battles for Chattanooga. But in order to understand what happened at Chattanooga, we need to go back to the Battle of Chickamauga, which happened September of 1863. Union forces and Confederate forces clashed, and Union forces fell back to Chattanooga. Now, from here, the Confederates could easily siege the city and cut off their supply lines and make it very hard for the Union forces to survive at Chattanooga. Now, why was it hard to get supply lines into Chattanooga? Well, you had the Confederate forces surrounding the area. They were taking up areas around Missionary Ridge and Lookout Mountain. You had the Tennessee River right there, where it was easy to spot out those supply lines, and artillery from Lookout Mountain, yet again, could take out those boats. You had attacks on the supply routes, and you had snipers here around the bends at Tennessee River, taking out the mules that would be carrying the supply wagons.
We had brought our Whitworth rifles from Virginia with us. These were placed down the river on our extreme left to shoot down the front teams, which, after being done, the road was entirely blocked. We then proceeded in a leisurely manner to use our English rifles. The road was too narrow between the bluff and the river for teams to turn around or escape in any manner, and they were compelled to stand until all were shot down. Sergeant Robert T. Coles, 4th Alabama Infantry.
Essentially, the Confederates on Missionary Ridge and Lookout Mountain wanted to starve out the Union soldiers taking cover in Chattanooga.
It should be noted that the Federal artillery on Moccasin Point kept the Confederates at bay and from making any large movements around the mountain.
Well, it really wasn't until October that General Grant actually came in with reinforcements and the new supply route, and he established what was called the Cracker Line, which fed across the Tennessee River and right into Chattanooga. Now, part of the reason why Union forces were able to establish the Cracker Line was that they came around Moccasin Bend on the Tennessee River at night in boats and secured the other side of Moccasin Bend.
There was a whole brigade of them, 1,800 strong, commanded by Brigadier General Hazen, and they had landed and gained a foothold so strong that we could not drive them back. First Sergeant William McClendon, 15th Alabama. October 28th, Union forces secure Brown's Ferry and at the same time move into Lookout Valley and take over Wauhatchie Station. The Confederates' delayed counterattack finally comes in on the night of October 28th. We had them in check until it was asserted that Jenkins could not carry his point and gave him time to fall back to his original position on the slope of Lookout Mountain. First Sergeant William McClendon, 15th Alabama.
Now, essentially, that established a stronghold where Ulysses S. Grant's forces could meet up and they could establish bridges to cross the Tennessee River and get into Chattanooga, and that's where you had the Cracker Line. Now, on November 23rd, 1863, thousands of Union soldiers clashed with Confederates at Orchard Knob, pushing the Confederates back to Missionary Ridge. And the Union forces were now able to hold Orchard Knob, and that would give them a stronghold against the ridge. Now, November 24th, the next day, Union forces attacked Missionary Ridge on the north side, but were held back by the Confederates. Another set of Union forces attacked Lookout Mountain. The Battle of Lookout Mountain would be known as the Battle Above the Clouds.
In the wee hours of November 24th, 1863, General Hooker developed a plan to get the Confederates off of Lookout Mountain. He would have Gary's division cross at Lookout Creek and form up along the ridge of Lookout Mountain. On the northwest side, he had a distraction so that his men coming up along the west side of Lookout Mountain would be masked. Coincidentally, There was a very thick fog that morning that covered their route along the west side of the mountain heading north. They took the Confederates along the ridge by surprise. Prior planning indicated that there wasn't very many fortifications, and in fact, General Braxton Bragg had some of his forces taken off the mountain the night before. As Union forces got towards the north side, they started meeting some resistance, and at the Craven's house was where most of the fighting took place. Because of the thick fog all around, the Confederates on top of the mountain could not provide support to the Confederates that were fighting the Union forces along the ridge. Confederate forces eventually fell back from the Craven's house, and the Union forces secured the whole ridge of Lookout Mountain. That night, General Bragg ordered his remaining forces off the top of Lookout Mountain, and the next morning, Union forces went up there and secured the whole mountain.
So the next day, November 25th, Confederate forces face off with the Union forces just below Missionary Ridge. So the Confederate forces ended up taking the top of Missionary Ridge, which silhouetted them and also made it to where their artillery pieces couldn't aim down far enough to shoot at Union forces charging up the ridge.
After a very brief rest, an effort was made to move the ford, which was found a very difficult thing to do. The long, steep ascent in front covered with enemy, the top lined with numerous batteries and breastworks, was well calculated to appall the stoutest hearts. My efforts were directed entirely to the officers and men in my command to move them forward, irrespective of the previous order of the lines or the movement of other regiments. Colonel Jason March, 74th Illinois.
Confederate forces fell back to Ringgold Gap for another battle that would ensue later on. Now, today's date is November 22nd, and this area, how you see it now, would have probably been what you would have saw back in 1863, almost exactly to the days of these battles. So why was Chattanooga important? Well, you had to think this was a vital area for supply routes. You had a lot of trains, and the Union forces definitely like using their rail cars to get supplies up and out of the combat zones. And another thing was that this area was also a huge Confederate stronghold point. Taking this point would give them access to Georgia and also into Atlanta. Well, guys, that's it for the video. And if you enjoy this kind of content, be sure to pulverize the like button and subscribe if you haven't. And as always, be sure to learn history and curate history. Share this video with your compadres if you enjoyed it. Make it a great day.